Political activist, political prisoner, political leader. Nelson Mandela, a towering figure in South Africa and in global politics, has died. He spent a good part of his life fighting for equality. For decades, Mandela's home nation of South Africa practiced apartheid. It's a social system where black South Africans were forced to live separately and didn't have the same rights as white South Africans. Mandela's efforts led to the end of apartheid and earned him the Nobel Peace Prize. Mandela battled health issues in recent months. He was 95 years old. When South African President Jacob Zuma announced Mandela's death yesterday, he said, quote, "He is now resting. He is now at peace. Our nation has lost its greatest son. Our people have lost a father."
Nelson Mandela's struggle for freedom defined his life. He was born in the remote hills of South Africa's Eastern Cape. He was given the name Rolihlahla, which means troublemaker. He was only given the name Nelson by a schoolteacher later on. After moving to Johannesburg and studying law, Mandela's troublemaking politics began. And as a boxer, he became adept at picking fights and sparring with the apartheid authorities, which had increased its oppression against the black population. It was then that Mandela made the crucial decision to take up an armed struggle, launching the African National Congress's armed wing. He was militant and a firebrand, defiantly burning his passbook, a dreaded document the apartheid authorities used to control the movement of South Africa's black population.
The Africans want the franchise on the basis of one man, one vote. They want political independence.
That simple demand and the methods Mandela took to fight for democracy eventually saw him and others tried for treason and sabotage by the apartheid government, acts punishable by death. But they got life imprisonment instead, banished to Robben Island, one of the country's most brutal and isolated prisons. Another political prisoner, Mac Maharaj, remembers the first time he saw Mandela in the prison yard.
I could see from the way he walked and from his conduct that here was a man already stamping his authority on prison regime.
Mandela was released 27 years later.
I have spoken about freedom in my lifetime. Your struggle, your commitment, and your discipline has released me to stand before you today.
And his lack of bitterness towards the apartheid authorities helped him to lead one of the most remarkable political transitions of the 20th century. Mandela, the trained lawyer and lifelong rebel, outmaneuvered the apartheid leaders. And he steered South Africa's peaceful transition to democracy. He won a Nobel Peace Prize together with his former enemy, the apartheid leader F.W. de Klerk.
And to devote myself to the well-being of the Republic and all its people.
And then he became South Africa's first black president in 1994.
So help me God.
What marks Mandela's career as president almost more than anything else is that after 5 years he stepped down. There have been very few presidents in Africa who've ever given up willingly.
Don't call me. I'll call you.
His retirement years were busy with fundraising for charities close to his heart. He celebrated his 90th birthday with much fanfare and told CNN in a rare interview that looking back, he wouldn't do anything differently.
I don't regret it because the things that attracted me were things that pleased my soul.
Now those who loved and respected him look to his legacy.
And if we want to learn from him, learn that life is not made up of straight victories. It's made up of mistakes, zigzags, stumbling, picking yourself up, dusting off the dirt, treating the bruise, and walking again forward. And that's what Mandela is.
Goodbye.
Robin Kerno, CNN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
just the facts.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
President Franklin Roosevelt talking about the attack on Pearl Harbor. On December 7th, 1941, Japanese forces launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base in Hawaii. 2,400 Americans were killed. Hundreds of military planes and 21 naval ships were destroyed or damaged. The attack led the United States to enter World War II. Pearl Harbor Day is this Saturday. Every year on December 7th, Americans remember that date, which will live in infamy.
All right, our next story today, when you hear the economy is good or bad, you might be wondering, how do people know? There are different factors, different indicators that experts are looking at. One example is the national unemployment rate. The one for November comes out today. Another economic indicator is GDP, gross domestic product. That's the total value for all the goods and services that a country makes in a certain amount of time. During the third quarter of this year, that's July, August, and September, the U.S. GDP went up 3.6%. That's more than economists expected, and it could be a positive sign for the economy. Another economic issue, the minimum wage, is at the center of protests happening around the U.S.
It's a growing movement. Workers banding together, fighting to raise minimum wage, with protests planned in nearly 100 cities across the country. This summer, thousands of fast food workers gathered in nearly 60 cities coast to coast. In New York and Chicago, fired-up protesters swarmed McDonald's restaurants, trying to persuade their fellow workers to join them in their fight.
Living on $7.25, you cannot do it.
Many fast food workers making minimum wage are struggling to get by. Eduardo Choi lost his job a few years ago. Now 58, with 2 children headed to college, he works at Kentucky Fried Chicken in New York, earning $7.25 an hour. He also works a night shift as a forklift operator at Kennedy Airport.
It's tough, real tough. I can't do none of the things that I used to do. Able to pay my mortgage, able to pay my car payment, able to take my family out to dinner. That we had to cut it out. You know, we had to sacrifice a lot of stuff.
Median pay for fast food workers is $9 an hour, or $18,720 a year, well below the Census Bureau's poverty line of about $23,000 for a family of 4.
Workers are taking these jobs because they are desperate in an economy that is still not creating enough work for people who want to go to work, and still not creating enough middle-class jobs or jobs that have a ladder to the middle class.
The president is paying attention to the issue, calling for a raise in the federal minimum wage.
It's well past the time to raise a minimum wage that in real terms right now is below where it was when Harry Truman was in office.
But the industry says it has created jobs in this difficult economy. In response to the strikes, the National Restaurant Association said in a statement, dramatic increases in a starting wage, such as those called for in these rallies, will challenge that job growth history, increase prices for restaurant meals, especially in the value segments, and lead to fewer jobs created.
We're wrapping up this week's roll call in the Southeast, but first we're making a couple stops out west. First, we're roping in the cowboys and cowgirls from Culbertson High School in Montana. Then we'll steer over to Denver, Colorado to check in with the Mustangs from Mullen High. And this wagon train pulls into the station in Kennesaw, Georgia, so we can include the North Cobb High School Warriors. Our last story seems like a Thanksgiving leftover. That's because we're talking turkey, but this one isn't for eating, it's for fighting. At least that's what it's doing to this delivery driver. The flightless and fearless fowl is scaring the stuffing out of some folks in this town. It pecks at wheels, it parks itself in the middle of the road, it even chased one driver out of his truck. No word on why the gobbler is so grumpy, but it's certainly determined to ruffle some feathers. Listen, this is no laughing matter. The situation is gravy, because if you're a delivery driver, you don't want to run afoul of that bird. Gobbles up all our time for today. Have a great weekend.